they do in Alberta. That's what we do differently. It's a sense of community. And all we did was foster an environment where people could come to the table. And I would often push and say, spend on our party what you would have spent on dinner with your family and a fine bottle of wine. And for some people, a fine bottle of wine is $10. Others, it's more. But the bottom line is top it up. I did a birthday party when I turned 50. And I engaged 13 other people who had all turned 50 the same year. And so we called ourselves the Birthday Boys. And we brought together the group, and I charged each of the Birthday Boys a donation to prostate cancer. And by the way, hats off to whoever made the decision to bring the man van here. Thank you. That is awesome. Is there anybody in the room who hasn't got a digital today? Because we've got time this afternoon, I'm sure, to, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go find out. Bottom line is get checked. If you haven't had a PSA done, big mistake. I've had prostate cancer twice. I call myself a cancer graduate. I got my bachelor's in 2001. I got my master's last spring. And damn right I'm ready. If I have to go get my PhD, I'm ready. But it's an element of empowerment for me in terms of how I think about the world of cancer. I am a cancer graduate. Anyway, going back to the charity world, awesome opportunities to engage. And that's where we had so much fun in our community. We created these events, and the biggest event I ever did was this birthday party. And I charged everybody, for the purpose of supporting prostate cancer, 50 grand or 100 grand to be in our own party. But for that, you got 50 tickets or 150 tickets, depending on the amount of money you gave. While I was on stage, I had a conversation with the MC about what is your expectation in terms of people bringing checks to the party, because there was rumors that I wanted everybody to write a check for $1,000, and I'm going, no, that's not the case at all. What I want you to do is think about what you've given to other cancer causes, then maybe gather that and throw it at prostate cancer. It'll be the first time you've ever done that, and that'll be meaningful. Whatever you choose to do, just make it meaningful to you. And then I joked and said, if you want it to be meaningful to me, double it. In other words, we can always dig a little deeper. Now, what was interesting is one of the birthday boys who had written me a check for 50 to be part of it, came over and handed me another check for another 50. He could afford it. He'd done very well with his big oil company, whatever it was. But he doubled down and offered me another 50,000, just listening to the logic of doubling down. And I appreciated that, but I knew he could easily afford it. What really touched me was when one of my daughter's best friends, 17, 18 years old, walked up and handed me another $20 and said, I'm doubling. That got to me. And that's the core messaging. It's not about the amount, it's about the thought process. And that's what we were doing as First Energy, was trying to change our community's perspective and outlook on how charity could be an integration point for all of us. And so that's why I emphasize that the lifelong learning of marketing, entrepreneurship, and philanthropy, creatively woven together, create a different opportunity for our country, because we change the world we live in by choice. I'm tired of hoping that government will make change. I'm tired of hoping that big business might step in and do something. We need to take charge of our own destiny. Now, to that end, I'm going to share. And by the way, I'm just going to get through question and answer right now. We will do more questions later, but I just want to get started. First question, yes, Kevin is a prick, so let's just get done with that. It always comes up, and no, he's not. We actually just bought his business, and I will tell you quite proudly that when we tore back the layers of the onion in terms of doing due diligence, I'm chairman of a business called Canoe Financial. We run about $3.5 billion of capital in the Canadian markets, and Kevin ran about 700 or 800 million. We bought the right to manage that business. And when we did the due diligence on regulatory compliance, squeaky clean. And I was absolutely delighted and proud to say that. So at this time, Kevin is the vice chairman of our firm until we finish the acquisition, then he's gone. So don't worry about that. We're not really that integrated. I'm the chairman, he's the vice chairman, which means I'm the chairman, he's the vice chairman. He's down here. He doesn't listen well, he doesn't report in at all, but the guy has the gift of the gab, and as some of you know, is active in looking at the political sphere. Here's my thoughts on engagement on Bill 6. We're just going to skip that because nobody's bothered yet. Come on. You know that you are responsible for raising your voice, terms of how you want Bill 6 engaged. I asked the question, I walked in of the organizers, is there any topic off limits? He said, no, and I said, not even Bill 6? I said, nope, go wherever you want. And my only point there is, as I observed, that there's I think 300 or 400 words in the bill. The bill has no teeth. So it's all going to come in implementation. It's all going to come in how they actually, and as you know, we've had members of the party, the NDP, telling us polar opposite experiences. Church groups are in, church groups are out, kids are in, kids are out. What are the rules going to be? Well, guess what? You, the people who elected the party that governs, I don't care who you voted for, but we, the people, elected that government. It's our responsibility to make the changes that we need to. So speak up, take the time, and it's not about doing Uber-style rants in Paris that have turned into fires and roads being shut down. It's about thoughtful engagement. It's about taking the time to have coffee with your local MLA. Inundate him with love. Show her that you understand the challenge of governing. The NDP are not stupid. They've made some stupid decisions, I'll certainly admit to that, or accuse them of that. But a lot of it's driven by inexperience, and a little bit of it's fear. Fear of how things are going to unfold. The whole process of the royalty review. I'm actually a slight optimist. When I looked at the consultative process that was put in place for the royalty review, it was thoughtful. Completely the opposite of Bill 6. Point made. But the guy running the royalty review, Dave Moffat, runs Alberta Treasury branches. So he's an employee of the province, arguably, but he's also one of the sharpest business minds I've ever spent time with. And guess what? The portfolio of ATB is heavily oil and gas. So he's not going to do anything that's going to undermine instantly that portfolio. And I'll also say that Peter Terzakian, the accountant or the economist who was put on this committee, the 4-person committee, is the brightest energy economist in the world. I've been trying to hire him for 20 years. The best of the best. So we had two really good people. Now let's roll the camera back. About 10 years ago, Ed Stelmach failed miserably in a royalty review that was run by the governing PC Thoughtful Party. Not thoughtful, it was the stupidest process imaginable. He gathered, several people on that committee were friends of mine. One was the advisor to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. What was the relevance of that moron? You know where I'm going with that. And the result was the stupidest and most ill-conceived royalty review imaginable, run by the party that my friends say should be governing our province. Not necessarily the right process. They ended up economically unwinding that entire royalty review. It took 3 or 4 years, cost the province billions of dollars in lost revenue and administration and overhead. It was stupid, stupid, stupid. So the new royalty review comes out tomorrow. Of course, we're suffering with an absolute crisis collapse on a global basis in terms of the commodity. I happen to be an optimist in terms of where the commodity is going to go, but that's just based on logic, and right now global markets are not based on logic. Supply, demand, we know with certainty that if you don't have economic returns, you don't keep wells operating, you don't drill new wells, you don't replace valves, so supply diminishes. And at the same time, as much as the growth curve on a global basis has tipped and it's pretty flat right now, I don't believe that it's ever going to truly decline. We have the westernization, if you will, of energy consumption. India and China are just the most obvious examples. So I do believe fundamentally that supply is going to taper and that demand will continue. They will cross and prices will rebound to an economic return. When that's going to happen, I'm afraid is now 2, 3, 4 years, not 1 or 2. So some challenges there. But the new royalty review comes out tomorrow. So I'm cautiously optimistic given the quality of the input. The question is whether or not the NDP chose to listen to that input as it transitions through. And that's been one of my key frustrations is I've reached out to a number of different cabinet ministers on my own agendas. I can't get a call back. And they need to engage. So I'm doing what I can. And I think with time, we will have a two-way street. I had the privilege of doing a few rants, and for those of you who know how Facebook works, you end up posting something. If people enjoy it, they share it, they comment on it, they call me a moron and an idiot or whatever. And some of this, we just go back and forth, and I ignore most of that kind of commentary because the anonymous, the trolls, the complete morons that wander through social media need to be ignored because they're less than the outside, the outlier. they need to be ignored. But we can start to have a conversation that's thoughtful. So I took a crack after the national election, the federal election, at making a comment. I'll start with this first one. And it said, I admire Justin Trudeau for his observation that in Canada, regardless of our political allegiances, and then I included, or frankly, race or religion, whatever, we are in fact neighbors, not enemies. I thought that was a very inclusionary kind of comment for a new leader to offer, because we had been dividing our country in the worst way. Rural, urban, north, south, race, gender, so many different groups, special interest groups. But the bottom line is we don't go to war when we disagree. I really am tired of hearing some of these people raise their hands and say it's time for Alberta to secede. We're not leaving. I want Canada to stick together. I love this country. And I think we need to. And I'll certainly tolerate some of the conversation about leaving our great nation, but if we just pull it apart, we're all weaker for it. The sum of the parts is greater, and that's why I believe. I made a comment about the royalty review. I've already talked about that. I also said I'm unafraid of the current Liberal plan, this was last September, to invest in infrastructure, because I believe infrastructure, and I don't mean just bridges in rural Ontario, I mean pipelines. And guess what? We don't need government to invest in pipelines. We need private sector to be given permission to do what's right. And I can tell you that if we let special interest groups govern the agenda in 1867, we wouldn't have built the original pipeline. Call it the Trans-Canada Railway, but it was what connected our nation. It brought Canada together. It was a condition of bringing BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan into Confederation, was to have this proper railway. And remember, Canada economically is about 100 miles wide and 4,000 miles long. Without that railway, we would not have a nation. But with special interest groups, we would have stopped at the Banff Park gates. Hell, we might have stopped at the edge of the prairie going, we got to protect the run for the buffalo while we shoot them. But it's one of those processes that we let extremists, I call them eco-terrorists. People get really mad at me for referring to any extreme views as eco-terrorists. But right now today, I get called a denier because I don't like hearing the word tar sands. They are the oil sands, and it's the people slagging what we're trying to do in terms of developing a nation that criticize and call the oil sands the tar sands. The reality is the amount of land that's engaged in the tar sands, and if this was Alberta, the tar sands represents less than a table. And we're letting the world attempt to dictate to us where we have economic requirements for restoration. We also don't have the dirtiest oil in the world. The dirtiest oil in the world is Venezuela. The second dirtiest is all the oil fields in Southern California. It's frustrating when we let extremists capture our flag. It makes no sense at all. Tides Canada is unquestionably, they've admitted they are funding protesters, often First Nations, to work against the pipeline companies so that we can't get a pipeline built. And in many cases, we're trying to twin an existing pipeline. It's a right-of-way in a route that's already been proven. Our pipeline's perfect, nothing's perfect. My point is we need to use the earth, but we will not allow, and I will not allow people to abuse the earth. There's a big difference between pollution and using the earth. We need to control pollution, whether it's recycling or the quality of water. I grew up in North Battleford. That means I've been drinking Edmonton sewage since I was a kid. The quality of Edmonton sewage has improved over the years, but the bottom line is we're using our earth. Now, don't get me going on Obama. I'll just leave that one alone. By the way, this is for you, Mr. Trump. I think it's shameful, and here I am benefiting from the same thing, that a stupid reality TV show has given this guy a platform that allows him to slag anybody he wants and claim he's better off for it. The other day he actually said, I could shoot someone on the street and no one would care. I'm that good. Real scary when that sort of thing is governing an agenda in terms of politics. But I'm going to wrap in terms of this conversation with paraphrasing an opinion editorial I was given the privilege to write for the Calgary Herald not that long ago, December 29th. And it's me commenting on where our city, but except whenever I refer to Calgary as a metaphor for Alberta, because what's good for Calgary, good for Edmonton, good for Alberta, is good for us. At the end of what's been a troubled and difficult year, I've been asked to comment on how we as Calgarians might be thinking about our various situations. My advice, let's fall back on history and remember our resilience as a people. I suggest that we in the West remember that we were established by the most intrepid, irrepressible, and independent entrepreneurs anywhere, building a small community at the confluence of the Bow and the Elbow Rivers, being Calgary, on the edge of a wild and open prairie, bordering on a rugged mountain wilderness. Our first settlers met all challenges with plucky determination that has allowed us, decades later, to be one of the finest communities in the world. It's up to us individually now to reclaim or claim the same gutsy spirit of those who came before. Why? Because we have no choice. We can't simply rely on big business, currently being hammered by commodity prices, volatile capital markets. They're not going to take us out. We can't rely on governments. Both our federal and provincial governments are terribly inexperienced. This is me being really politically correct. Their inexperience is showcased by the fact that they are all too often moving way too quickly without consultation or thoughtful discussion. Think Bill 6, you know where I'm going with that. Inducing fear of the unknown and volatile regulatory environments in many too many ways. That's why it's important for individual initiative. A simple reminder, the world is not ending, it is cycling. We are living, working, eating, and playing. Alberta is not shutting down. There is a commodity price cycle working against us. It's hard, it's painful, employment is growing. We have been going off topic now, or off script. The need for us as a community to support our charities has never been greater. And I already sense amongst my own peer group when I ask for money, the wallets are tightening. And I'm pushing harder than I've ever pushed because the people who need are in greater numbers and in greater need than they've ever been. We're facing big challenges, but we know there'll be a brighter day. I'm the first to acknowledge the second, over the next several years, changes are necessary. Our energy industry in particular has to get its commodity or its cost price structure in line in order to compete. Off topic again, or off script again. 10 years ago, $50 oil looked pretty good. Today, $50 oil is not enough. What's changed? Our cost structure. Any business seeing as to where revenues decline dramatically knows it has to become more cost efficient. There's all sorts of opportunities in terms of technology. Now is the time to evolve and create those technologies. I don't believe in economic diversification in terms of chasing other businesses, Silicon South or whatever. I believe that we need to, just as I saw in the room next door, vertical and horizontal integration within our existing industries in terms of exploiting new technologies. I mean agriculture, I mean mining, I mean resource development, I mean oil and gas, I mean coal. All of those is where we need to play. Stick to the knitting and get really damn good at it. Be global leaders in every sector and stop chasing the grass is greener in Silicon Valley, so we want to have these new high-tech startups. Bullshit. Let's use technology in our existing industries, our existing people. Enough on that. To me, the very vocal and misguided outliers who are proclaiming the end of the carbon-based economy greatly exaggerate its premature death. I am one of the believers. Ludicrous spending habits. And I'll just quickly say that we've learned that healthcare costs in our province are 30+% higher on a per day, per capita, per person, whatever the ranking is, than the national average. There has to be cost compression in the public sector. The thought that we've now protected or frozen wages in the non-union sector, I'm going, no, that should have been a 5% rollback. I'm sorry, the suffering has to be taken across all platforms, whether it's union or non-union. And those of us who are entrepreneurs are knowing that we're getting our salaries rolled back big time, because that's the economic reality. Government has to tighten. So I for one was pretty unhappy when I saw a wage freeze. Oil companies are doing 5 and 10% across the board rollbacks. We need to have thoughtful leadership in terms of how we manage our economy. Spending issues aren't just for governments and not just for energy or for oil companies. They're for people. The silver lining of a downturn, we force people to get our own household spending underway. You can't get a new F-150 every year. That's the reality of the economics of what we're facing. Lastly, I've long believed that measuring success based on real wealth, family time, friendships, and physical health naturally makes us feel richer than we think. And one of the best ways I know to find real and lasting significance in life is to enrich the lives of others. Thank you for listening to The Ramp.